The best horror movies confront the darkness that might lurk beneath the surface of our everyday world. Monsters embody persistent real-world fears. Body-snatching aliens slithered onto the scene during a time of political suspicion, whereas a modern take on body snatching cleverly skewers the chilling reality of racial and cultural appropriation.
Get out!
The horror genre also explores emotional turmoil created by external and internal triggers. From grief and generational trauma to the anxieties surrounding sex and intimacy, and female persecution in the era of Puritanism, horror cinema holds a mirror to our deepest fears, both personal and collective. Japanese horror, in particular, excels in a subtler form of terror. Personal fears and social critiques become the building blocks for its profoundly disturbing narratives. While vengeful spirits have long been a staple of Japanese horror, the turbulent socio-economic climate of the 1990s Japan rejuvenated the trope of unappeasable apparitions. Films like Ringu and Dark Water are emblematic of this psychological horror renaissance. Both films, directed by Hideo Nakata and based on Koji Suzuki's stories, permeate these narratives with a sense of impending doom. But beneath the scares, there are deeper layers that are worth exploring. On Ringu, the almost always female vengeful spirits are victims of violence or injustice. Driven by rage and a desire for revenge, the cinematic representation of Ringu is designed to strike fear into the viewers' hearts. Ring deals with a deadly spirit perpetuating a curse through a videotape. Characters watch seemingly incoherent visuals flashing through their TV. Once viewed, you receive a phone call, and 7 days later, you die. Reiko Asakawa, a journalist and single mother, is pulled into the investigation of the tape. She races against time to inquire about the origins of the tape in order to break the curse. Reiko enlists the help of her ex-husband Yuji, a professor and a psychic. She learns about Sadako, a girl gifted with extraordinary psychic abilities. The fear of Sadako's power sealed her tragic and violent fate, transforming her into a vengeful spirit. Can Sadako be appeased? Reiko's pursuit of answers turns more desperate when her son Yoichi watches the tape. Eventually, a spine-chilling manifestation of Sadako makes Reiko understand that one can escape the curse only by spreading it. Sadako can be interpreted as a figure of untapped feminine power rendered monstrous by patriarchal structures. Film scholar Barbara Creed, in her 1993 book, coined the term Monstrous-Feminine. In it, Creed explains how the traditional male gaze in horror cinema reflects anxieties about feminine subjectivity and female sexuality. However, in modern horror films, Monstrous-Feminine is no longer limited to a patriarchal stereotype. Sadako's monstrousness becomes a symbolic expression of female rage against social stigma. the confinement, mistreatment and silencing constitute the dissemination of her deadly curse. Sadako both fits and subverts the monstrous-feminine trope. Modern Japanese horror has many such examples, including Kayako in The Grudge and Asami Emasaki in Audition. Asami is the castrating woman, but Audition goes beyond the crazy girlfriend trope to critique the male gaze and entitlement in unsettling ways. Kayako is the monstrous mother who was also a victim of domestic violence. Her ghostly form and the eerie death rattle are manifestations of her unresolved rage, which perpetuates inescapable curses. Mothers go through a lot in Ring. Reiko's single motherhood in a way highlights the social isolation that impacts both herself and her son. Yet the fight against the curse to save Yoichi turns Reiko into a determined protector, ultimately pushing her to make a sacrifice. While Reiko is largely spared from society's judgmental gaze on single motherhood, Yoshimi, the single mother protagonist in Dark Water, is already under enormous emotional strain when the haunting begins. Amid a bitter divorce and custody battle, Yoshimi moves herself and her little daughter Ikuko to run-down apartment building. There, the mother-daughter duo is haunted by the restless spirit of Mitsuko, a victim of parental neglect who drowned in the building's water tank. Yoshimi herself was a neglected child. She dreads repeating the cycle of abandonment as her ex-husband is determined to deem her an unfit mother. We repeatedly see the girl children of Dark Water staring at the rain, caught in the cocoon of isolation. By illustrating the visual connections between Yoshimi, Ikuko, and Mitsuko, the narrative offers an empathic gaze on Yoshimi's plight. The empathy also extends to the apparition of Mitsuko, a fragile and innocent child who simply wants to be loved and protected. Yoshimi herself understands that and makes the ultimate sacrifice for the sake of Ikuko. Mitsuko isn't a vengeful spirit like Sadako, but the spooky similarity between these two ghost stories lies in the recurrent use of water imagery. Water is generally a symbol of femininity and motherhood. However, in the damp desolation of Ring and Dark Water, water is shown as a contaminated and engulfing force. Sadako and Mitsuko die in stagnant water, abandoned and forgotten. Hence, their wetness becomes a powerful symbol of the pervasive haunting and the tragic past. The drowned kindergartner and teenager remind us that the world is an unfair and unforgiving place where human suffering propagates just like the relentless supernatural menace. Ring and Dark Water were remade in Hollywood, which is inarguably superior to the subsequent batches of English-language Asian horror reboots, yet excellent performances can't mask the loss of cultural context and jump-scare-driven storytelling. Although the J-horror boom at the turn of the millennium is long over, it has inspired the rise of the horror genre in East Asian and Southeast Asian countries. Imbued with local folklore and chilling atmospheres, these films use the paranormal to confront dominant social discourse and personal anxieties. Anguished single mothers resisting supernatural threats is also a recurring trope in the contemporary horror landscape. Still, the disorienting ambience and psychological dread of Dark Water and Ring continue to intrigue and terrify the viewers.